All right, here we are. Hello, everybody. I'm Robyn with Scaling Up, and I'm really excited to be here today with Mercedes Samudio. Hello. And all of you who have joined us live right here on Zoom. Per usual, right? Our usual virtual hangout these days. Thank you for being here. Today, we are talking to Mercedes about a really cool topic that I know a lot of you probably are curious about, especially if you work with families, if you work with children, and that's how to work with parents who are struggling in the therapeutic process, and like, what can we do to engage them more, for them to feel like they're more part of the process, to feel seen and understood, and help them learn how to support their children, their child, in their process as well. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to keep it low key, conversational. So ask your questions. I'm sure, Mercedes, you'll have some opportunity. You'll have some ideas that'll pop into your mind, like, "Hey, let's talk about this. Let's do that. I want to hear from you. If this happened, blah blah blah." So, be here, be present with us. If you want to vocalize your comment or question, feel free to unmute yourself when it's appropriate, when it's time for that. If you want to just utilize the chat, you can do that too. Either way. All right. So, Mercedes, thank you for being here with us today. Please take a few moments and introduce yourself to our lovely audience.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. And I actually want to say that I have always and will always love how inclusive and amazing you are, Robyn, at facilitating any space that I've ever seen you in. I just always admire it. And so I love sharing these spaces with you. But my name is Mercedes Samudio. I use she, her pronouns. I am learning how to say this statement, so I'm going to practice it today. Yes. I reside on Tonga land, which is currently La Habra, California. And where I am in my life is a really healthy space. So I'm actually really happy to be here talking about this, because over the past 2 years, I've actually realized that despite the fact that I don't have children, I definitely know what it feels like to develop your parental identity and figure out what that caregiving identity is for you. And so I've really stepped into this really healthy space where helping parents figure out how to deal with their identity, helping professionals how to learn how to deal with their identity while dealing with the parent's identity has been a really fun space for me. And currently I'm in my doctoral program working on a parental identity development model to share. And so I'll share some of that today. Talk a little bit about it, but it's something that I'm really excited to share once the doctoral program is over, and to really kind of give you guys what this looks like. There's a lot of emerging research on parental identity and how it influences the way we show up. And so I'm excited to be part of that, like, pioneering space, if you will. Yes. So today we'll be talking about that, since we're talking to professionals, how to scale up working with families.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Mercedes, you and I have been colleagues for a long time, connected for a long time through Facebook groups and stuff. I have your book, which, did you mention your book? I don't think I did.
I have a horrible look. This is my book. I actually have it near me.
Yay!
Today. But yes, I'm also an author and a speaker and all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. But I'm also playing around with the new intro that doesn't always show that. So
yes, that's fine. Absolutely. Yes. So your book, ShameProof Parenting, I got it, I think, like the month it released. And it's so amazing. I love learning about different parenting perspectives, especially ones that are supportive of parents and not shaming or belittling or putting all the blame on them for all the problems in the world, even though I know, right, I'm already saving up for my child's therapy fund. She's already in therapy. Who am I kidding? But yeah, so thank you so much for adding to the wealth of wisdom, especially for Black families, for Latinx families, for other families of color, East Asian families, South Asian families. I mean, there's so many families of color that don't have a lot of resources, and people that they can connect with who have a similar experience of being a parent of color in the US. And I think it's really important.
Yes.
Obviously, you sell your book around the world. However, right now we are currently located in the US. So, that is our kind of like our learning. And often we don't have a global perspective on a lot of things just because of how our education is set up here. So anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about your journey as a clinician that works with families, specifically that works with parents. How did you get to where you are now? Like, what led you to this specific area of focus?
Well, I often say it's my own upbringing. For those of you who have come into my work, I actually opened my book up with a very traumatic incident that pretty much set my life on the path that it currently is. And that really did give me a good foundation for who I am today, for better or for worse. And as I mentioned at the top of the hour here, I'm not a parent, and my husband and I have chosen to be child-free. But I think definitely healing my own childhood, working with parents. I've been working in this space since I was 22. I'm 36 now. Like, I've always been in this space, and I've always felt this really deep connection to parents, right? One of the things that I started to notice in my work was that even though I could connect to kids really quickly, I have a very youthful presence. I'll probably talk about some of my nerdiness as I talk today, but I could always connect to my kids. What I started to notice was that the parent would just sit there waiting for someone to see them. Right, there'd be all these people coming in and out, and I would help liaise with all these people working on the kid, focusing on the kid, and the parent would just be sitting there. And part of one of the programs I was early with called El Nido Family Centers, which is a program in Southern California, and it primarily works with pregnant and parenting teenagers, supporting them on just finishing high school and getting out of the cycle of teen pregnancy and how it tends to harm girls once that happens. In this program, I'm watching three generations. I'm watching the new baby, the teenager, and the mom all try to figure out how to live in this world that has completely, demoralized and dehumanized what it means to be a mom, especially if it happens before you're old enough to, whatever that means. And so that initial job that I had, kind of being a case manager, really strengthened my already kind of desire to do this work. It made me realize that I really do want to help the way that we bring people into their parenting, the way that we bring people into how they show up as parents. And I'd say pretty much ever since that job in my own childhood, I've really been on that path to looking at how do we help parents when they're still human and they can't stop being human while they're raising a child. And all of that kind of divulged into ShameProof Parenting, hashtag in parent shaming, which was kind of the foundation for that. And then really looking at how shame is part of the gap between the knowledge we have about raising kids or child development and then actually doing it. Within that gap, I have found there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of societal pressure. There is a lack of understanding the journey that a parent takes as they develop their parental identity. And that's what makes it so difficult for you to be someone who knows and understands, but has a hard time executing and bring it into your life. Even as professionals, I think sometimes we stay over here with the understanding. We forget that there's a human who also has to execute all of that understanding and what barriers and what limitations impede that human from taking all of that knowledge and applying it to their parenting. And so hence the parental identity development model, right? Hence ShameProof Parenting. These are kind of my attempts to add to the narrative of what does parenting really look like. We have a lot of parenting skills books. We have a lot of XYZ type of parenting, but no one has really talked about what does it mean to be a human who decides to care, give, and raise a child. What does that even look like? How do all of us go from being single humans to entering into this agreement that we're going to raise another human? if that's something we choose to do. And so that's pretty much what my journey's been, from my own upbringing to now realizing that we need more than just parenting skills. We really need to be looking at how humans evolve into the parental identity that they will have as they raise a child.
Yeah, I love that. I love the addition or the focus on a human growing into that parent, the parenting role, and what does that mean? Aside from the skills, or, the best practice, like here's the best way to, talk with your kid and get them to quote, get them to listen without arguing or yelling. And, all of these shoulds, and, you're a good parent when your kid does this, and it's really challenging. I have my own experience as a parent, and I would say that the hardest thing for me of being a parent is also being a human. I don't get to take that hat off. I'm always a human, and I can't skill my way out of that, So there we are. What I would love to learn a little bit more about what you mean when you say shame-proof parenting. What does that mean to you and the families and parents that you work with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so shame-proof parenting is this idea that we can't stop shame, guilt, or judgment from happening, but we can proof ourselves from it, in the sense that when it happens, we're not internalizing it as a flaw that our family or myself as the parent can take on and is now flawed in some way. It's really about saying, how did this happen? What's going on? And how would we as a family like to bounce back or come back? How would I as a parent like to come back from this? And so the idea of being shame proof isn't that shame never infiltrates. It's just that when it does, as a family, how do we come together to support ourselves? As the leader of the family, right? The head of the family, how do I as a parent learn how to say, wow, that didn't feel good, and what do I want to do now to manage this in the future for my family?
Yeah. So the shame is going to be there, right? That we're going to have moments where shame creeps in. We say something biting, we're impatient and maybe crabby, or, whatever we're feeling in the moment. And then we do something and we feel shame, rather than taking that in as, well, it's all about me and my failure as a parent, or just I'm a terrible person, or whatever that shame is telling us, and keeping that in private, in secrecy. We share it with everyone else in the family that, well, maybe our support people, maybe we have a co-parent, maybe we have some, mentors or other parents that we talk with and share with, and we say, hey, I'm feeling this way. How can we navigate this? What can I do? What support do I need? Can I request that support of you? That's kind of what I'm hearing, how it might show up, if in an experience where, gosh, like that felt really bad. I don't like how I feel in this moment. And I'm curious how you feel in this moment, and how can we move forward? Yeah. So
Yeah.
then the shame is not narrating or dictating the path of the parenting role. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's the hardest part of it, because in order for parents to be able to do that, they also have to be aware of their own shame stories and their own shame narratives. Hence why I think this is a bigger discussion to have. It's not just about parenting anymore. It's really about the human who has made this choice, right? It's really about the human who says, I do want to raise a child, but I don't come, as a blank slate. I come with all of my own stuff too. So what have I learned about being a caregiver? This is why I think it's so important to have cultural representation within our parenting world, which we do not have and we sorely lack, because when a family like myself comes into deciding on parenting, well, no one looks like me in the parenting world, not just how I look, but my family has never been represented. So I was raised by my step grandmother because my biological parents couldn't care for me. And my maternal grandfather passed away after he got married to my step grandmother. So it's like that family has never been represented, right? We see more, step families now. We see more, I think, adoptive families, but foster families definitely don't get shown a lot. Kinship families, which is what my family would be called, where relatives take care of the child. So I'm not entered into the legal system, but still, right, I'm not cared for by my biological parents. All of those things go into how you decide you want to have a family, what family you came from, and the ways in which that family was even ridiculed. My family was all crazy and mixed up because on one end, we had to look like this was my mom and her children were my siblings, but genealogically, she is my step grandmother and her children are my aunts and uncles, right? And so can you imagine the layers there that come with having to keep all those stories together, as well as now deciding, do I want my own family that does all of that? Right. And so I share my story this way because it's really important to show that if I've never seen anything represented, then you grow up thinking, is there something wrong with me? Is there something wrong with my family? Why aren't families like mine shown? Right. We're considered broken. Right. I come from a broken home, a broken family. And so this terminology and all of this is embedded not just in our society, but it's embedded in our professional world too. We're always trying to strive to get families to look a certain way, because if they don't look that way, then they're broken or something's wrong with them or they're too this or too that. And so one of the reasons why I like ShameProof Parenting too on the professional side is that it also reduces that shame for us, right? We're not going into a family saying, oh, I know what's wrong with your family. We actually want to hear the narratives. How did this family come to be? How do you see your family? Again, going back to that cultural space, you'd be surprised how many people are in a family when you ask someone, who is your family? Right? It's not just the people you see here in this session or even the people that you've been told about. There might be a lot more people going on. And if that's not represented as a family, then you don't even know as a professional, I need to ask about who do you see your family as? And so I say all this to say that part of why I'm doing the work I do, despite not having kids and despite making a conscious effort not to, is because I also have a family, right? Choosing to be child free with my husband is a family. Choosing to have animals instead of children is a family. And so I like to speak in this space, not from this air of I'm a mom and I know what it feels like, but from this air of all of us actually wrestle with parental identity. Those of us who choose to actually raise humans has a different trajectory than those of us who choose not to, but all embedded in that are our own narratives and our own identities around what does it mean to be in a family and what does it mean to play a role in a family.
I love that. Okay. Can we kind of go on a little bit of a tangent real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Tangent only because we did not agree to talk about this, but you said some really important things that I think are really important when you talk about understanding parenting and family from a diverse cultural perspective, and how you were talking about what family means and normative ways that normative displays of what a family is supposed to be, or descriptions of what a family is supposed to think. I think a lot about mononormativity. So the monogamous relationships as being set as the normative romantic relationship dynamic. And then the nuclear family that goes with that has also been set as the standard, the quote, normal, healthy, the type of family structure that helps the children develop into well-adjusted, productive members of society. I'm saying all of these words with a little bit of, sarcastic tone on purpose. But it is something that I think influences a lot of our perspectives as, people in community with others, as people who decide to have children, either, birthing children, adopting children, caring for children in your community, in the family, however that shows up. But it doesn't leave a lot of space for, how do we normalize all the different ways that children are taken care of, all of the different ways that children are brought into family, and how children bring others into family. And so I'm really curious, and I don't know that we have, I don't know where we're going to go with this right now, but I just wanted to bring that up because I do think that's really important that we remember that there's a lot around families and parenting that have been normalized based on one very specific way of family and parenting showing up. And that's through the lens of, monogamous relationship and nuclear family. And in fact, the global majority of people don't raise children in a nuclear family context. In the US and some other westernized cultures, sure, we try to, we're told that's the best way. And it's really, as a parent myself, I can say that is not the best way for me. It is absolutely not. It is way too much. For me to be me and my child's other parent, for us to be the only two people responsible for her development, for her, growth, for her safety, for her well-being, for her place of refuge, for her place to ask questions and gain insight and kind of grow into a whole person into herself. Like, that is way too much for us, Yes. And so I know from my own experience and the experiences of other parents in my life that it is really isolating and there's a lot of pressure. And so most of the time, when I'm assessing myself as a parent, it's against these almost impossible feeling standards. And then therefore, all of the judgment comes back on me too. And the failings are all about me. And, I'm responsible for all these things that I physically cannot do. I do not have the capacity. And so I'm curious about how you think about ShameProof parenting or guiding parents in a therapeutic process in a way that kind of that honors, that recognizes, right? Yes, these are all the societal pressures. This is what's been normalized for us. And how is that not working? How does that not match for you? And how do you do that in a context that leaves space for alternatives, for ways that allow folks to expand what parenting means for them, and that brings in families that already are doing it differently, right? There might be polyamorous families raising, children. There could be people that are raising their families kind of in a quote village context, or co-op living, where they share responsibility for taking care of the house and any children that might be there. How does that look for you and the folks that you work with?
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective. And I think you said it really helpfully when you talked about how you and your co-parent shouldn't be the only two adults or humans that are influencing your child's full humanness. And the reason why is because everyone here, we've got about 20 people here. All of us are influencing each other's development right now. Right? We're just all sitting here. And so our parents aren't just the sole people who influence us and haven't been that way for our whole lives. One of the things that I think is super important for parents to realize is that the way you in your family decide to raise your family is the right way, right? And I say that knowing that there's a full spectrum. There are people who are abusive and there are people who are Zen. However that is, I just want you to know that's the right way of doing it for your family. Now, people are going to say that's right and wrong and morals. And I 100% agree that we all have our own morals and we all have our own ideas and we all have our own perspectives. But one of the things that I've learned over the years is that no matter what my morals, ideas, perspectives, or education are, a family is going to do what they want to do at any given time. And no amount of shame or reporting or anything that I'm doing is going to change that. The reason why I pulled out of that individual stuff all the time is because I realized every parent came to me sharing the exact same thing that Robyn shared, which is, I can't do this by myself, but people keep putting this on me. Every teacher, every professional, every person in my family says, Robyn, why isn't your kid sitting down at the table? Robyn, why isn't your kid sitting in class? And that is a societal norm that we need to completely eradicate. Because as Robyn said very astutely, there's no way her and her co-parent can be the only people who influence this child. And because of that they can't be the only ones who mold that child. If they go to school and get influenced by everything at school, asking Robyn to mitigate that is wrong. If I send my kid to Mercedes' house and they're hanging out and something is done there, asking me to know all the time what that was going to be is completely wrong. right? It absolves our society of having to do what it needs to do, and it puts all the onus on someone who is flawed and imperfect, which social media has told us is the cutest thing, but we don't allow people to actually do that. I'll say something that I think will really kind of hold all of this together. And it's actually something that I'm working through right now as a human. Right now, I'm going through a friendship breakup of almost 20 years. The reason why this matters is because I don't have a child, but she does. As we talk about what influences who and who influences what, I realized that I've been in her child's life for the past 6 years. And throughout this breakup, she's going to have to hold herself together to manage herself, her humanness, all that's happening for her, and still be a mom. That actually happens regardless of how I feel about this breakup, how I feel about her, or whatever. Society would say that she should be able to handle all of that. However, judging by what happened with our friendship breakup, she might not be able to. I share this because this is happening currently in my life. I don't have kids that I have to attend to, but she does. When you think about how society will shift and make people feel bad about things, I've learned the hard way that trying to hurt people because of how they parent or trying to make them listen to you, it never works, because that person, I can guarantee, is going through a friendship breakup or a relationship or something at work. No matter what you say about their parenting, a parent has never been and will never be influenced by just their parental identity. However, what I've learned through my ShameProof Parenting work and what I've learned through really helping parents is that when we help fortify a parent's identity, they make better decisions, not just for their kid, but even for their own growth and their own development, while they're still having to mitigate life and help another human being grow as well. And so when I think about what this work is doing, that's how transcendent I think about it. I don't think about it just as like I'm helping one parent. I realize that this work is going to change the way we see parents, the way we see humans, the way we see the person who decides to care give versus the person who decides not to. And that's really the crux of why I'm so passionate about doing this, why I'm so passionate about supporting professionals in it, because I think as professionals, we sometimes become the gatekeepers to that healing that parents need, because we have our own ideas about how a parent should be and how a family should look. And so I think part of this work, not just the ShameProof Parenting or the parental identity, is really to just change how we all view this role and this identity, so we can change the way that we support people in this identity and the way that people continue to reach out for support while they're managing their parental identity and their parenting roles.
Mm-hmm. I think that's wonderfully said. Like there isn't a one right way to show up as a parent and to step into that role and to develop as a parent. And so I'm curious then how the parental identity development model and your work with parents can help to, act as prevention. So, abuse prevention, and also how it can help to create healing and transformation, right? Maybe there were some unhealthy dynamics. Maybe there was some past abuse. How does this framework and this work help to bring transformation and restoration and prevention?
That is wonderful. And I love that you asked that, because the model is a developmental model the same way child development is, the same way emotional development is. It helps us understand that the moment someone decides in pregnancy, whatever that looks like, to bring a child into the world, they are starting on their journey as on their parental identity journey. Throughout the 9-stage model, what we're looking at is in each of these life stages, infancy, pregnancy, infancy, toddler, childhood, as your child is going through this, where are you? What questions do you need to be paying attention to? And how would you like to get support to move to that next phase, right? And so the reason why this is going to hit all of these kind of ideas of prevention, intervention, and even awareness is that it first brings to light the idea that you do go on an identity journey as a parent. Parenting is not innate. Parenting is not something we just all do or we all have to do. It is an identity journey, right? It is something that we choose to do for better or for worse, but we're constantly choosing as our child matures and as our child moves forward, right? In the prevention space, it helps us to understand that if a parent should be here developmentally, but they're not, how can we support them to get there, right? For instance, in the teen years, a parent is in the role playing stage. They should be able to support their child in making decisions, not by lecturing them, but by actually inquiring and being part of the process for them, right? If a parent has a hard time being there, that must mean that another developmental space for them hasn't been acquired or attempted yet. And so the model says, well, let's go back. Where did you get lost in your parental identity? Where did you get stuck? Where did things get difficult? This brings up things about trauma, right? Whether it's immediate trauma now, maybe something happened with the co-parent. Maybe your family went through something during a particular stage and you weren't able to focus on your parental identity, so you're stuck there. But having a model that says where people can go backwards and forwards allows us to say, wow, if at adolescence, this parent should be able to engage in role play and support, but they're having a tough time, this isn't because they're flawed. This is because a part of their development may be stalled. And let's go back and see where that could be, right? As opposed to saying, wow, you really failed your child. Now your kid can't do this and something, you've done something wrong. And all of that doesn't help. But if I can say there's something developmentally here that we may have missed, well, let's go back and look at that. Well, okay, in the toddler years, we realize that you had a really tough time. A lot of things happen. And so you might be stuck in just holding on and wanting your baby to still be a toddler. Well, no wonder you can't role play with them at their adolescence because you're still holding on to that time that you missed because of that time that was so traumatic. Let's go back there and talk about that. Let's get you up to what you missed, right? Let's get you back up to here. That's the whole piece of it. Right? It's not to tell people you're wrong for not being here any more than having a 10-year-old who's developmentally 5 who would tell them anything's wrong with them, right? It's this idea of helping people to understand that the parental identity is an identity. It's not something that just because I'm raising a child, I already have and it's already fully formed. Unfortunately, your parental identity is forming as you do it, just like almost everything else happens in our lives. And so the overarching idea for this model is to give us a framework with which to kind of look at parenting, not just through our own haphazard feelings about our parents and our own families or what we think is quote unquote right. This is really an empirically founded model. I'm going to say knock on wood when I finish my doctoral studies, right? That shows that this is actually what happens to people as they attempt to care give while still being human themselves. And so I'm hoping that with this model, we can stop arbitrarily assigning different things to parents and say, well, now I know that if this parent has a child that's a toddler, this is developmentally where they might be.
Yeah, my wheels are turning. I mean, you said a lot there about the process that feels very resonant with me. And I'm curious for those who are with us live, what's resonating for you? Feel free to share in the chat 1 or 2 things that are resonating for you, either as with your own personal lived experience of caregiving children, raising children in any form, or professionally in working with parents and other caregivers that are raising children. What resonates for you in that identity model? I'd love to learn what is connecting for you in the chat. So feel free to type there. But yeah, I think a lot about how, when parents are supporting their children or sometimes, sometimes not very well supporting their children in a therapeutic process because we don't really know what to do all the time. Like, how do we show up in this space? What are some things that you help parents and other caregivers with when they are really struggling as their child or the children that they are helping to raise are in their own healing process in the therapeutic space or maybe the whole family is in a healing journey after a specific event or kind of just, life in general. Um, what are some of the things that you have found really helpful in enhancing that experience for parents so they're feeling engaged and equipped, not just like, oh, I have tools, but equipped to hold themselves in these situations with their young ones?
Yeah, I would say shame-proof parenting is a really great way to start that. The 6 tenets of shame-proof parenting really embody this idea that you are human, having a human experience while trying to raise another human, having a human experience. And so the 6 tenets are empathy, awareness, knowing needs, confidence, resilience, and support. And if you notice, these tenets are really conceptual. They're not skill-based or tip-based, right? Because empathy looks different for everyone, right? Empathy in your family is going to look different for everyone, right? Let's say you have a family member who has special needs. That empathy is going to look a lot different than if you have a child who's typically developing, right? There's a lot more grace. There's a lot more space that you may need, right? I talk about a lot of the times when we're looking at shame-proof parenting, it's not something that you get to and you're just going to do. It's a constant kind of moment of something just happened to us. And let's go back to, do we have empathy for each other? Do we know what everyone needs right now? Are we aware of who is really affected and kind of moving through that, right? Do we know who our supports are? Who can help us for this? One of my favorite things to tell people with support is, you wouldn't go to Albertsons for an oil change, and you wouldn't go to Jiffy Lube for a head of lettuce. So be mindful of who you're going to, right? Maybe Robyn isn't the best for this, but she's really good for something else, right? That's actually okay. And I teach parents that quite a bit. Your support doesn't have to look the same for everything that you go through, right? You might have different people for different needs, and that's okay, right? Your mom or your siblings don't have to be the go-to for everything. And sometimes they can't be, and sometimes it makes it worse, right? But I say all that to say that when you are thinking about shame-proof parenting, it's not about a stagnant destination. It's really about embodying these concepts. So when things happen, right, whether we know they're coming or they're really unexpected, we can come back and say, do we have empathy for ourselves? Are we being kind to ourselves while we get through this moment, right? Are we keeping up with our needs? Are we making sure everyone's going to sleep and eating and really taking care of themselves? You'd be surprised that just hitting those 6 tenets when something happens helps just to ground everybody. It doesn't take away the event, and it doesn't make the event go faster or slower, but it helps us to remember, right, this is my family, this is my sister, this is my mom. I don't have to fight them. These are my kids. They're not the enemy, right? Okay, right? And to remind yourself of that. Again, we still have to deal with the issue, but we're not looking at each other as you're the enemy and you're the cause, and why is it you? We're looking like, okay, as a family, this has happened. So what would we like to do to keep ourselves together? And I think if you haven't had an opportunity to practice that over the past 2 years, I don't know where you've been, but everyone has had to really practice. I can't fight everybody who I have to live in the house with 24/7, right? And so in a sense, I've been joking around saying everyone's been practicing shame-proof parenting, whether they know it or not, because you have had to live in the house with your family 24/7 for 2 years. You've had to learn how to stop fighting. You've had to learn how to stop blaming everybody. You've had to learn how to meet each other's needs and be aware and bring more empathy, get that support together, right? And so I think one of the things that's best here is to remember that life is going to happen. Shame-proof parenting isn't about preventing life from happening. It's about really realizing that when it happens, we don't have to beat each other up or find the blame or the identified person. We can really come together and say, now that this has happened, how would we like to move forward together?
Yes, thank you for that. I think those are really great points and great things to remember. Thank you. Leilani, thank you for sharing in the chat. And your question was that you love attachment science and wonder how Mercedes incorporates attachment into your work.
Yeah. All of it is incorporated. All of it. I love attachment science too. I think it can be a little under, like, it's not as representative of culture as I'd like it to be. I think one of the things that I take from attachment science is this: you need at least one person in your life that you can connect to. You need it. right? Whoever that is, if it's family, if it's someone in your community, whoever that, if it's a partner, you do need that. What I weave into ShameProof Parenting is the 6 tenets help us to maintain that connection with the person we want to maintain it with. Many parents I work with from this perspective say, I just want to connect to my family again. I want to feel like I can do this. I feel like I shouldn't have done this. It's too much. And ShameProof Parenting reminds us that it's a choice that we've made, probably based on our own narratives. I definitely know why I'm not a mom, and I'm definitely open to why I haven't done it because of my own narratives and my own healing, right? But for those of us who have chosen to do it, it's with the same air from your own narratives and from your own healing or lack thereof. And so as we work into ShameProof Parenting, it's really honoring those stories, honoring your attachment to your family and how that shaped you, and then honoring how that's influencing the way you might be creating attachment in your own family, whether you're aware of it or not, right? And so I love it as well. I think attachment science definitely explains a lot about how we connect to people, but I often think sometimes it can be a little limiting in the fact that attachment isn't even a science. A lot of cultural groups just do it. I think Robyn mentioned it, but Western societies are really the only ones who decide to pull people away and isolate and silo people. Most communities, even when I grew up, in my community, everyone took care of me. Everyone on the block knew who I was, knew who my mom was, and if I was doing the right or the wrong thing, it was taken care of. And I think we've moved away from that communal way of living. And so attachment science feels like a way for us to understand that communal kind of living again, just kind of in a more empirical based way, if you will.
Yes, thank you. Yes. We'll leave it at that because we're at time, even though there's so many things I'm sure we could still talk about.
Yes.
And I really appreciate your time and wisdom today, Mercedes. And if any of you here live with us or listening or watching to the replay want to learn more from Mercedes, engage further in conversation, just want to remind you that Mercedes is one of our speakers at the Be Bold Summit, taking place this June 10th and 11th in Denver, Colorado. And as promised, we have a special gift for folks who joined us here live, who signed up and are watching the replay later. We have a 20% off discount happening for the next 3 days. So you have 3 days to take advantage of this discount. There's the link right there to sign up. For the Be Bold Summit, you can join us live in person, or you can join us live online because we have a live streaming option that we're really excited about. So we can't wait to see you there. If you have any questions about what Mercedes talked about today, feel free to send us an email, and we'll get them over to Mercedes and, get them answered. And we'll see you at the summit. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here.
Thank you guys. It was great. See you guys at the summit.
Yes. All right. Bye, everybody.